Yeah. Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. You are back at That Effin' Sports Show. I am Chris Fox. I bring in, as always, the Adam Hules, Adam Hules Sports on Twitter, NFL writer for Sportskeeda. Go to Sportskeeda, writes a lot of amazing articles. The NFL season's ramping up. The articles are coming out, and we are in the AFC West, the last division in the NFL. We've done every team, every division. We got these last four. And what's really fun about this dynamic is that we get to go back and revisit all the games that we've talked about. Because, of course, we have to talk about the AFC West opponents because they all play each other twice. But we've already talked about so many other games on their schedule for them and the entire NFL. We kind of get to go back and look at that as we go through these teams. It's kind of fun to think that we've gotten this far and here we are at the last four.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's what's made this series so interesting, right? Like picking all the team schedules one by one. The games you're picking on one team's schedule is significantly affecting other teams later on that you're going to pick. So like when we're on these teams, they may be at a starting point that we weren't expecting them to be at. The AFC West is going to be the most prime example of that because we've already picked 11 games for each of these four teams. We just have the 6 division games left to go. So a lot of the outcome of these teams and how they're going to end this year could already be determined, because if you had a bad outcome from 11 games, you may not be able to make up the ground in these final 6.
Water cooler talk. You know, we all sit around, talk with our friends. How do you think Minnesota's going to do this year? 9-10 win. Well, how do you think Detroit's going to do this? 9-10 win. How do you think Green Bay's going to do this year? Oh, they got about 9-10 wins. And well, the math doesn't add up when you do it that way, just off your head. So when we go through and do each team game by game all year long, and then we end up in the AFC West, and we've talked about all these teams. Like you said, 11 of these games, we can't go back and switch. Some of the math is already done. We've only got 6 games left for each of these teams, and everything else is already decided. We can't go back. We can't backtrack and say, oh, that record's not good enough, or that's too many wins or too many losses. We've already talked about it.
Right, yeah, like 100%. Like, there's been teams along the way in this series, and if you've been listening along, we surprised ourselves sometimes, right?
Oh, absolutely.
There's a team that, either one of us may have thought we were higher on or lower on, and then we look at their record at the end of it, and we're like, I guess I don't like them as much as I thought I liked them, or vice versa.
Absolutely. Works that we're starting with Vegas, because Vegas is definitely one of those teams. How do you think Vegas is going to do? Oh, you get an idea in your head, and now we're going to go through and talk about where we think they're actually going to end up. Last year's numbers kind of don't count, especially at the quarterback position, because now we got a new quarterback. Obviously, Carr is out. Garoppolo is in. Carr finished at QB 17 last year. Doesn't really matter because Garoppolo is in there now. We don't really need to talk about the quarterback numbers. Team numbers, they were 12th in points for, 26th in points against, which is surprising because we talk about Crosby. We all know what a force Crosby is, but honestly, their defense was 29th against the pass, 28th overall, 19th against the run. You would expect bigger numbers with the notoriety that Crosby has earned for himself. I mean, the guy's a maniac. Don't get me wrong. I love the guy. Only 6 wins last year, still good enough for third, even at 6 wins. So that tells you a little something about the division. Those wins, they swept Denver. They beat Houston. They beat New England. They got an overtime win in Seattle. No real big standout wins there against big teams, and a lot of these teams are going to have to play again. We know that Vegas had the leading rusher in the entire NFL, 1,653 yards in Josh Jacobs. We know they had the leading receiver in Adams with 14 touchdowns, and yet they still only finished 6-11. One of those anomalies that just is the NFL.
You kind of hit on it with the names that you mentioned there, because I see the Raiders as kind of a top-heavy team, right? Those 3 big names you mentioned, Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, are easily top 10 players at their position, arguably top 5 players at their respective positions. But then when you go beyond those 3 big names, not a whole lot to love about the Raiders team beyond that, in my opinion. So it's like, can the Stars get it done? That model has worked in the past, right? I mean, we saw the Rams win a Super Bowl by going top heavy with some superstars and then like mediocre on the rest of the roster. So like that strategy can work, but can the Raiders pull it off with a quarterback like Garoppolo?
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about that contrast when we get to Kansas City. You know, Kansas City, not top heavy. They've got a couple good stars, and then they kind of plug and play. The New England teams of the past, couple solid starters, and then Belichick plugs and plays. Obviously, it worked. Vegas going the other way and having some top level talent. And you mentioned the receiver. Look, Adams was number 3 on your fantasy rosters, number 1 in touchdowns, number 3 in yards. The next receiver was 29. Let's see what the Raiders are going to throw down this year. Their first game is a divisional game. It's at Denver. Denver probably improved. Las Vegas hoping to improve with Garoppolo. Can they play in Denver in week 1 and get it done?
You know, a lot of changes over there in Denver with Sean Payton coming in. Major change for the Raiders, obviously, going from Carr to Garoppolo. So both teams might come out a little bit rusty in week 1. Now, the advantage that Garoppolo has is that Josh McDaniels is his head coach. So they're running a system that he's already very familiar with. I think that will help him be a little bit less rusty in this adjustment. You know, a lot of times I love these home splits in these division games. Normally that would be kind of the direction I would go with a Broncos and Raiders type of series. But in week 1, given all those factors I just talked about, even though it's in Denver, I'm going to give the Raiders the win.
I actually also gave the Raiders the win. I didn't think you were going to give them the win because you do like those home splits. No, I gave the Raiders the win too.
Yeah.
A lot for the same reason. You know, I think Denver's still going to kind of be gelling with the new head coach. They've completely wiped out their running back room. We'll talk about that in the next episode. They've got some team dynamics to develop, whereas the Raiders really only have to bring Garoppolo up to speed. And when you got guys like Jacobs and Adams to work with, I think they get to speed a lot faster. Not to mention they swept Denver last year, so they obviously know how to play them. Week 2 at Buffalo. They travel across the country. We've talked numerous times throughout this series about the travel, and they're going to Buffalo. We both gave Las Vegas the loss. Buffalo really just kind of proving that they're the better team. Las Vegas, especially on defense, even with Max Crosby, definitely showing that they don't really have the defensive talent, the defensive strategy, I don't know, to beat teams like Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, Buffalo's shown over the last 3 years or so that they are one of the most consistently good teams in the NFL. They've won postseason games in each of the last 3 seasons. Very impressive. On the other hand, the Raiders, we don't exactly know who the Raiders are right now. Add in the fact that the game's in Buffalo and it's the cross-country travel. Bills all day in this one.
Week 3, it's Pittsburgh. I must have been drunk because I gave the Raiders the win at Pittsburgh in week 3. It is early in the season. Pittsburgh has to travel to Las Vegas, which I'm sure is what influenced my decision.
Home field advantage kind of playing the role here. I think both teams are kind of equal-ish in their expectations on this season. So I went with the home team.
Week 4, they take a little bus trip over to LA. They play the Chargers. Nice divisional game. This actually is a pretty good setup. Decent, pretty good offenses, not great on defense. It's not a big road trip. Split last year with the Chargers going 1-1 in the division. It's in LA, even though the Chargers have that stigma of failing to achieve the potential. I think that they still have enough on offense, especially in week 4. Things are starting to pick up. Things are getting dialed in. Teams are starting to gel a little bit. Chargers at home, even though it's not that big a road trip, I'm going to give the Chargers the win in week 4 against Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with a lot of what you said. For me, this is, kind of back to my bread and butter type of situation. And a team like the Raiders and the Chargers, these divisional games, these 1-1 situations, I like the home team, and spoiler alert, probably going with the home split in this one.
Yeah. Week 5, Green Bay comes to LA. We gave Vegas the win as we're not really sure what we're going to get in Green Bay in a close one. Vegas gets the win at home. Then we split in week 6. New England comes to Vegas, and I actually just listened to this episode the other day. So I know that you really think Belichick is going to be able to work his scheming Belichick magic against former coaches and come up with a strategy despite the travel to beat Vegas. I, of course, gave Vegas the win. You gave Vegas the loss.
Yeah, and I mean, not even just coaches with the McDaniels thing, but the Jimmy Garoppolo history with Belichick as well. Like, this is, I think, a game that's kind of personal for Bill. If you remember the whole Garoppolo thing with Brady in New England, there was all those rumors going around that Belichick wanted to move on to Garoppolo from Brady, and Robert Kraft kind of stepped in and didn't let that happen, and that's why Garoppolo got traded. Now, we're not 100% sure if that story is true, but a lot of sources have kind of talked about that's kind of how it went down in New England. So with the Garoppolo stuff, with the McDaniel stuff, I think Belichick will dial up something special for this game, come up with a new game plan that nobody's ever seen before, and I think the Patriots will find a way to win.
I like that you're going with something Belichick's going to need to do something that no one's ever seen before to beat the Raiders. I'm really excited to watch this game.
I don't think he has to. I think he will.
In week 7, Vegas goes to Chicago. We split again. I guess I'm a little more up on the Garoppolo, Adams, Jacobs trifecta there. I gave Vegas the win at Chicago. You gave Vegas the loss. Same with Detroit, as Vegas spends 2 games up in the north. Week 7, Chicago. Week 8, Detroit.
I gave the 2 home teams the win in those games. I think that the Lions and Bears will both be improved teams this year. They want to be improved. Winning games at home against teams like the Raiders are games that they kind of got to win.
Everybody in New York wants to visit the West Coast, apparently, as New England came to Vegas in week 6. The Giants come in week 9. The Jets come in week 10. We both gave Vegas the win over the Giants. Not really surprising if you listen to the Giants episode, but I do think it's a bit surprising that we gave Vegas the win over the Jets in week 10.
A lot of people obviously very high on the Jets this year. I am definitely not as high as most are on the Jets. And then the Giants, I'm not high on at all. If you go back and listen to that Giants episode, you'll see how low I truly am on the Giants this season, despite the fact that they made the playoffs last year. The Raiders, in their 2-game homestand against 2 East Coast teams, I gave them the win in both.
Talk about the dynamics of going through all the games and stuff and not being able to take. This is one I would change if I could. The more we go through this, I'm getting higher about the Jets, just thinking about it. And I went back and listened to the Jets episode. I don't want to tangent too far, but I really do think this is the best team Rodgers has ever had behind him. And it's really going to be up to him to decide it. So I would have taken this one back if I could. I digress. Week 11, Las Vegas going on vacation themselves, heading over to Miami. And we gave Vegas the loss against Miami. Tua or no Tua, Miami just a really good team and probably a little too much for Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm particularly high on the Dolphins this year, especially with a healthy Tua. When you really look at their roster, they are really loaded. They made the playoffs last year despite all the injuries to Tua. And then they went out and they added Jalen Ramsey during this offseason. So a lot to like about the Dolphins.
Week 12, they got to play Kansas City. They're going to have to play them twice. Kansas City swept them last year. I think Kansas City, spoiler alert, going to sweep them again this year.
Yeah, I mean, hard to disagree with Kansas City probably sweeping the Raiders this year. When you look at Mahomes' career record against divisional opponents, it's hard to really pick any of them against Mahomes with the way he's dominated all of them. Give me the Chiefs.
Week 13, the Raiders get a bye, and then week 14, Minnesota comes to Vegas, spin the wheel and see where they land. I said that Vegas is going to lose to Minnesota. You actually gave Minnesota the win.
I gave the Raiders the win in this game. Raiders coming off of a bye, Raiders playing at home. And Vikings, just a team that I'm not particularly sold on. Their record was great last year, but they didn't look good doing it. Their defense has a lot of issues. Not high on the Vikings. I'll take the Raiders at home.
That secondary is ugly. Vegas Chargers in Vegas, week 15, 2 divisional games coming up. They got the Chargers, then Kansas City. I talked about home splits. Are you going to go with the home split here in week 15?
Yeah, I mean, I referenced it during the first game that this feels like a home-home type of situation for me, which I love, so that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, I can dig it. I'm actually going to pull the upset on this one. I'm going to give LA the 4-game losing streak. I think they drop both to the Chargers. I know. It's every year. It's everybody expecting more out of the Chargers than we end up getting, but I'm buying in just a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and give the Chargers the sweep against Vegas, completing in week 15. Same with Kansas City in week 16. Not as big a surprise on that one to give Kansas City the sweep. They did it last year. No reason to think that they won't do it this year. Well, that's not true. There is reason, but go to the Kansas City episode to find out what that is.
Yeah, I mean, Mahomes dominates this division. He does it again, sweeps the Raiders.
Week 17 at Indy. We give Vegas the win. A lot of people watching Indy this year to see what Richardson can do. Vegas at Indy, but they're in a dome. I love Adams and Jacobs in this game. I think it's going to go fairly lopsided. I would take the points in Vegas's favor on the over in week 17.
Playing on the road is a little bit tricky. Colts a really tricky team in general to figure out this year. Like, what are the Colts this year? I could see a very wide range of outcomes for the Colts. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they won 3 games or 9 games. You know what I mean? So, strange team to pick. I took the Raiders.
Find out what we actually pick. Go back and listen to the Colts episode. Right. It might surprise you. It surprised us a little bit, to be perfectly honest. Go back and check that out. Week 18, they finish up against the division. So 3 out of the last 4 weeks, they got to play divisional opponents. Honestly, 4 out of the last 6 games are against divisional opponents, which is a tough ask for the Raiders. Week 18, it's at home. Denver comes to Las Vegas. This could actually have some implications within the division, at least. I mean, we got Kansas City there, so maybe influence the wild card spot a little bit.
Probably won't matter too much for the actual division race with Kansas City in this division, but you're 100% right about the wild card possibility. This could be a game that's very important for both of these teams, the Broncos and the Raiders, who do think that they should be in the mix for a playoff spot this year. Look, I usually like the home teams in these kinds of situations. I went with the road team in their first meeting, so I'm kind of taking a page out of your book and actually going with the road split here. And I'm going to take Denver to get it done. I believe in Sean Payton. I think Russell Wilson's going to turn things around this year in this very favorable situation under Payton. By the end of the season, I think that they'll be clicking, and I think they're going to win this.
I do think Denver is the better team, especially by the end of the season. And with something on the line, possibly that wild card spot, we'll find out as we get through the division. I also give Las Vegas a loss in this final game. I've got 9 wins, CU with 8. So we're within 1. The same general feeling there as usual with the Adam Hules is probably a little more accurate. That's why you're an NFL writer at Sportskeeda and I'm not. A respectable season. I mean, they go from 6 to 11 to 8, 9 wins, a couple extra wins. Is it the division? Is it just the teams they end up with? I mean, they got some offensive players. They got a fantastic defensive player. Really not enough to get anything particularly accomplished in the realm of playoffs and championships and things like that.
The AFC is tough, man. There's a lot of really good teams in this conference, and teams are going to have to be special to make the playoffs in the AFC. The Raiders finishing in that 8 to 9 win range doesn't really surprise me. Kind of turned out similarly to how I would have predicted it would. So, to quote the great Denny Green, they are who we thought they were.
There you go. That's a great way to end it. And that's where we'll finish it off. The Adam Hules Sports on Twitter. Sportskeeda.com is where he puts out all his NFL articles. Go check them out. More and more coming. Great information. Adam, thanks for joining us on this one. Raiders fans probably not going to be happy, but honestly, it's kind of what they're used to. Somewhere around 8 or 9 wins. That's what we have them at. What do you guys have them at? Let us know. Subscribe to the podcast. Join us for the next one. Every division, every team. We are in the AFC West. Vegas is done. Denver comes up next. We'll see you there. You guys take care.
You don't wanna fuck with me. A slow burn like a disease. Just tell me that I can and show you things that you couldn't believe.